Hi and welcome to this brand new episode of Horror Talker. If you find these stories thrilling, do subscribe to our channel Horror Talker. And share it with your friends and family. Let's start with some exclusive stories which you won't believe actually happened. I still remember the day we decided to escape the city and rent that remote cabin in the woods of Big Sur. It was meant to be a weekend getaway with a few close friends, a chance to unwind and reconnect with nature. Little did we know that our escape from the urban jungle would thrust us into a far more terrifying wilderness. As we made our way to the cabin, driving deeper into the forested heart of Big Sur, the sense of isolation grew with each passing mile. Towering redwoods loomed overhead, their thick canopies blocking out the sun, casting the winding road into shadow. The thick forest seemed to swallow us whole, and cell service vanished along with the city lights. The cabin itself was rustic, a weathered structure that had likely stood for decades. It had an old-world charm, and its isolation was a selling point, a chance to truly disconnect from the chaos of our daily lives. We had no neighbors, no Wi-Fi, and no distractions. It was just us, the forest, and the promise of a tranquil weekend. As we settled in, the warm sunlight filtering through the trees painted a picturesque scene outside. We unpacked our bags, cracked open a few beers, and breathed in the crisp, mountain air. Laughter filled the air as we planned hikes and campfires, excited about the adventures that awaited. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and twilight descended, an unease settled upon us like a heavy fog. It started subtly, with the rustling of leaves and the faint echoes of distant sounds. We dismissed it as the usual symphony of the woods, animals going about their nightly routines. Our first night was relatively uneventful, except for the strange whispers that seemed to echo through the forest around us. It was as if the very trees held secrets, their ancient branches whispering tales of times long past. We laughed it off as a product of our overactive imaginations and the eerie stillness of the woods at night. The following day, while exploring the cabin, I stumbled upon an old diary hidden in a dusty corner. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded with age. It seemed to have belonged to someone named Eliza, and its entries chronicled a heartbreaking tale of love and loss. As I read through Eliza's words, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. She had lived in this very cabin, and her story was one of heartbreak and despair. She wrote of a love torn asunder, of a man named Samuel who had promised her forever but had disappeared into the wilderness, leaving her to fend for herself. The diary hinted at something far more sinister lurking in the woods, an entity she referred to as the shadow in the trees. Eliza wrote of its whispers, its haunting presence, and the fear that it had driven Samuel mad. Her last entry was a desperate plea for salvation, a plea that had seemingly gone unanswered. My friends and I exchanged uneasy glances as I shared the diary's contents. We were now acutely aware that something was amiss in these woods, and the tranquility we had sought was rapidly unraveling. That night, as we sat around the campfire, the whispers returned, more pronounced and unsettling than before. It was as though the forest itself was conspiring against us, its ancient secrets clawing their way into our consciousness. I couldn't help but notice that the trees around us seemed to close in, their branches twisting and contorting in strange, unnatural ways. Evelyn, one of our group, broke the uneasy silence. "Did anyone else hear that? Those whispers?" We nodded in reluctant agreement, our eyes darting nervously from tree to tree. Fear hung in the air like a shroud, choking off our laughter and camaraderie. A chill breeze rustled the leaves overhead, creating a disconcerting symphony of whispers that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves. The once familiar sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the hooting of owls, were now accompanied by a spectral chorus of unintelligible voices. Steve, our resident skeptic, scoffed at the notion. "Come on, guys, it's probably just the wind playing tricks on us. You know how sound carries in the woods." But even his bravado couldn't conceal the unease etched on his face. We were seasoned campers, no strangers to the eerie ambience of the wilderness at night, but this was different. This was a presence, an unsettling energy that clung to the air like a malevolent fog. As the night wore on, we became increasingly aware of an ominous presence lurking just beyond the reach of our campfire's glow. Shadows danced at the periphery of our vision, their movements too deliberate to be dismissed as mere tricks of the light. Despite our unease, we decided to stay another night, convinced that our fears were irrational. We couldn't allow a few whispers and shadows to drive us away from what had promised to be a much-needed retreat. But that second night, the forest seemed to come alive with a malevolence we could no longer ignore. Strange symbols etched into the bark of the trees glowed with an eerie light, and the whispers grew into murmurs that bordered on the edge of intelligibility. The very ground beneath our feet trembled, as though the woods themselves were awakening to some ancient, maleficent power. The whispers, no longer a mere whisper, grew into faint murmurs that carried a chilling cadence. They teetered on the precipice of intelligibility, as though spectral voices were trying to convey a message from the beyond. An indiscernible language, alien and haunting, filled the air, its meaning just beyond our grasp. The very ground beneath our feet seemed to tremble and quake, as though the ancient woods themselves were awakening to some malevolent and long-dormant power. It was as if the very earth rebelled against our intrusion, a warning from nature itself to abandon our ill-fated journey into the heart of the forest. Steve, the skeptic, had lost all pretense of bravado, his face drained of color as he clung to a tree for support. This isn't right," he stammered, his voice quivering with fear. "We need to get out of here. Now." But the forest had become an inescapable labyrinth of haunting symbols, quaking earth, and incoherent whispers. Our attempts to retrace our steps led us only deeper into its enigmatic depths, as though it conspired to keep us within its grasp. The murmurs around us swelled, now bordering on the edge of comprehension, but their message remained cryptic. Visions of ancient rituals and long-forgotten ceremonies danced before our mind's eyes, but the meaning remained elusive, shrouded in a veil of otherworldly mystery. Fear overtook us, and we made the unanimous decision to leave at first light. Sleep eluded us that night, as we huddled together, our flashlights and lanterns casting feeble beams into the encroaching darkness. As dawn broke, we hastily packed our belongings, our anxiety mounting with each passing moment. It was then that we saw them, the shadows in the trees. They coalesced into a formless, shifting mass, their movements synchronized in a grotesque dance. With trembling hands, we abandoned our plans for one last breakfast, jumped into our cars, and fled that cursed cabin in the woods of Big Sur. The forest seemed to protest our departure, as though it resented our intrusion and the knowledge we had uncovered. To this day, I can't explain the sinister presence that had descended upon that remote cabin. I can only hope that Eliza's soul has found peace and that her tragic story remains a warning to those who dare to seek solace in the heart of the wilderness, a wilderness that hides its secrets well, until it chooses to reveal them to those who wander too close to its edge. Point Reyes National Seashore was a place of unparalleled beauty. The rugged coastline, dramatic cliffs, and pristine beaches made it a haven for nature enthusiasts like myself. But amidst the splendor of the natural world, there was something else that had always captured my imagination, the distant, enigmatic beam of the Point Reyes lighthouse. For years, I had heard stories of the lighthouse, a solitary sentinel perched on the edge of the continent, guiding ships safely through treacherous waters. Its hypnotic, rotating light had become a fixture of the landscape, casting a piercing beam far out into the Pacific Ocean. It was a beacon of hope and a testament to human ingenuity. During one of my camping trips to the area, I found myself captivated by that distant light. As I sat by the campfire with friends, I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. The rhythm of the beam, a steady pulse in the darkness, beckoned to me like an age-old secret waiting to be discovered. One evening, as the campfire crackled and my friends drifted off to sleep in their tents, I made a spur-of-the-moment decision. I would venture to the lighthouse. The idea had taken root in my mind like a stubborn weed, and I couldn't resist its allure any longer. With flashlight in hand, I set out on the winding trail that led to the lighthouse. The night was clear, the stars above shimmering like diamonds. I followed the path, the sound of crashing waves growing louder with each step, until I stood at the base of the cliffs upon which the lighthouse stood. There it was, in all its eerie splendor, the Point Reyes Lighthouse. As I climbed the steep steps that led to its entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trespassing into the past. The lighthouse had been abandoned for years, replaced by a newer, automated beacon further inland. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of salt and dampness. Cobwebs adorned the corners of the dimly lit room, and the rusted machinery that once powered the lighthouse lay dormant, covered in a thick layer of dust. It was a place frozen in time, a relic of a bygone era. My flashlight cut through the darkness as I ventured deeper into the lighthouse. I explored its chambers, each one filled with remnants of its former inhabitants, a well-worn chair, a stack of tattered books, and faded photographs that hinted at lives lived in isolation. It was when I reached the top of the lighthouse that things took a chilling turn. The room was dominated by a massive Fresnel lens, the heart of the lighthouse. The beam of light it had once cast had illuminated the perilous waters of Point Reyes, but now it stood dormant, its glass surface marred by time and neglect. As I gazed out through the dusty windows, something in the distance caught my eye, a ship. It was an old, wooden vessel with tattered sails, and it sailed directly into the path of the lighthouse's beam. I watched in awe as the light passed over the ship, its sails catching the brilliant illumination. The ship moved with a haunting grace, as though guided by an unseen hand. It sailed steadily and resolutely, with none of the creaking or groaning one might expect from such an ancient vessel. Its bow cut through the water, leaving ripples in its wake that glowed with an ethereal light. The lighthouse's beam, a powerful and unwavering force of illumination, swept over the ship with a mesmerizing precision. As it passed, the ship's tattered sails caught the radiant light, transforming them into spectral specters that danced in the night. I was filled with a profound sense of awe and unease, as though I were witnessing a scene not meant for mortal eyes. The ship appeared to be sailing not on the open sea but through the very fabric of time itself, a vessel from a bygone era emerging into the present. As the ship passed beyond the reach of the lighthouse's beam, it gradually faded into the obscurity of the night, leaving me with a sense of profound wonder and disquiet. What had I just witnessed? Was it a glimpse into the past, a fragment of some otherworldly tapestry, or simply a trick of the light? It seemed to dissolve into nothingness, as though it had never been there at all. My heart raced, and I blinked, half expecting the ship to reappear, but it was gone. Shivers coursed down my spine as I realized that what I had just witnessed was impossible. Ships had long since abandoned these waters, and the lighthouse hadn't been operational for decades. Yet, I had seen it, a phantom vessel, momentarily brought back to life by the lighthouse's spectral light. I descended the steps of the lighthouse in a daze, my mind awash with questions and uncertainty. The night had taken on a surreal quality, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far beyond my comprehension. The following day, I delved into the history of the Point Reyes Lighthouse, uncovering a maritime mystery that sent chills down my spine. In the late 1800s, there had been reports of ships mysteriously disappearing in the vicinity of Point Reyes. The crew members of these vessels would recount tales of seeing a brilliant light, only to vanish without a trace. These eerie accounts had given rise to legends of the ghost ship of Point Reyes, a spectral vessel said to be cursed by the lighthouse's unforgiving beam. It was a tale that had haunted the region for generations, and its origins were shrouded in myth and speculation. As I shared my findings with my friends, their skepticism mirrored my initial doubts. Yet, as we sat by the campfire that evening, I couldn't help but feel that we were not alone. The rhythmic crashing of the waves seemed to echo with a haunting refrain, and the stars above held secrets that we could scarcely fathom. That night, as we lay in our tents, a distant beam of light cut through the darkness. It was the Point Reyes Lighthouse, still standing as a sentinel on the edge of the continent. But this time, it was different. This time, it beckoned not to ships lost at sea, but to us, the curious souls who had dared to approach its enigmatic glow. As we ventured once more to the lighthouse, I couldn't help but wonder if we were destined to become part of the maritime mystery that had haunted these waters for over a century. The unsolved riddle of Point Reyes had ensnared us, and we were drawn inexorably into its chilling embrace. The night air was charged with an unspoken tension as we stood before the lighthouse, its light cutting through the darkness like a spectral blade. We had come seeking answers, but the enigma of Point Reyes held its secrets close, and the maritime mystery that had captivated our imaginations remained as elusive as ever. With each passing moment, the eerie beam of the lighthouse seemed to grow brighter, casting long, distorted shadows that danced around us. It was as though the lighthouse itself had become a living entity, aware of our presence and taunting us with its cryptic messages. Whispers of forgotten sailors, lost at sea, echoed through the night. The voices seemed to come from all directions, their words unintelligible yet filled with an otherworldly urgency. It was as though the very air around us had become a conduit for the restless spirits of Point Reyes. In that moment, as the mysteries of Point Reyes closed in around us, I couldn't help but wonder if we were destined to join the ranks of those who had disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of their existence. The night wore on, our resolve tested by the unrelenting presence of the lighthouse. As dawn approached, we made the decision to leave, to escape the clutches of Point Reyes before it could claim us as its own. As we retreated down the winding trail that led away from the lighthouse, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. The beam of light still cut through the night, its secrets guarded by the enigmatic structure that stood as a sentinel on the edge of the continent. In the end, the maritime mystery of Point Reyes remained unsolved, its secrets buried deep within the heart of the lighthouse. We had ventured into the unknown, drawn by the allure of the past, but we had emerged with more questions than answers. Point Reyes National Seashore, with its rugged beauty and haunting history, would forever hold a place in my heart, a place where the line between reality and legend blurred, and where the enigmatic beam of a lighthouse continued to cast its spell, beckoning those who dared to seek the truth. Silicon Valley had always been the epitome of innovation, a place where the brightest minds came together to shape the future. When I landed my dream job at Syscorp Labs, I felt like I had won the lottery. The company's cutting-edge tech projects were a secret treasure trove of possibility, and I was eager to dive headfirst into the world of innovation. My first few months at Syscorp were a whirlwind of excitement and discovery. The sprawling campus was a haven for tech enthusiasts like myself, buzzing with activity and ingenuity. I was assigned to Project Genesis, a secretive endeavor rumored to be the company's crowning achievement. The details were scarce, but the whispers around the office hinted at something groundbreaking. As I delved deeper into Project Genesis, I began to realize that the word groundbreaking hardly did it justice. What I discovered was a Pandora's box of ethical dilemmas and scientific unknowns that would forever change my life. My initial task was seemingly straightforward: improve the algorithm for genetic sequencing. The goal was to revolutionize medicine by enabling personalized treatments for a wide range of diseases. It was a noble cause, and I was thrilled to be a part of it. But as I sifted through the code and data, I stumbled upon something that sent shivers down my spine. Buried within the algorithm were anomalies, genetic sequences that were far from ordinary. They appeared to be the result of a deliberate manipulation of the genome, something that went beyond the boundaries of ethical science. My curiosity got the best of me, and I began to dig deeper. Late nights in the dimly lit lab became the norm as I uncovered more unsettling secrets. The origins of these manipulated sequences traced back to Project Genesis, and the more I learned, the more horrifying it became. Syscorp was experimenting with human genetics on an unprecedented scale, creating artificial genetic mutations with the potential to rewrite the very fabric of our species. The implications were staggering. What Syscorp was doing had the power to shape humanity's future, but at what cost? I couldn't help but think of the ethical boundaries we were crossing, the consequences that lay ahead. It was a moral quagmire, and I was trapped in its depths. I began to question my colleagues, carefully probing for answers without revealing my own discoveries. The responses I received ranged from ignorance to willful denial. Some were true believers in the potential for good, convinced that Syscorp was on the cusp of a medical revolution. Others turned a blind eye to the ethical concerns, driven by ambition and the allure of scientific discovery. The deeper I delved into the rabbit hole, the more isolated I felt. I couldn't trust anyone with the truth, not when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. My nights were filled with restless dreams, and the weight of my discoveries bore down on me like a vice. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. I couldn't stand idly by, complicit in Syscorp's ethically questionable experiments. I had to expose the truth, no matter the consequences. I began gathering evidence, files, data, correspondence, anything that would shed light on Project Genesis. The more I collected, the more I realized the extent of Syscorp's activities. They were playing with fire, manipulating the very essence of life itself, and the potential for catastrophic consequences was all too real. As I prepared to blow the whistle on Syscorp, I couldn't help but fear for my own safety. I had seen the lengths to which the company would go to protect its secrets, and I knew that I was putting myself at risk. But my resolve was unwavering. Humanity deserved to know the truth, to decide for itself whether to embrace this new frontier or condemn it as an abomination. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, someone with a reputation for exposing corporate malfeasance. We met in secret, and I shared my findings, laying bare the dark underbelly of Syscorp's experiments. The journalist was equally horrified by what I had discovered and promised to bring the story to light. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and anticipation. I watched as the journalist's exposé on Syscorp made headlines around the world, sparking outrage and debate. The company's stock plummeted, and investigations were launched into their activities. Syscorp's response was swift and ruthless. They launched a campaign to discredit me, portraying me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. They called me a traitor to the cause of scientific progress, a saboteur of human advancement. Despite the backlash, I stood my ground, determined to see the truth prevail. The legal battles were grueling, but with the journalists' evidence and the public support, I emerged victorious. Syscorp was held accountable for its actions, and Project Genesis was dismantled. In the end, my decision to expose Syscorp's unethical experiments came at a great personal cost. I lost my job, my reputation was tarnished, and I lived with the constant fear of retaliation. But I also gained something invaluable, the knowledge that I had chosen the path of integrity and morality, that I had taken a stand against the darkness lurking within the world of innovation. As I reflect on those tumultuous days, I can't help but wonder what the future holds for humanity. The boundaries of science continue to expand, and the allure of progress remains as strong as ever. But I hope that my story serves as a reminder that with great power comes great responsibility, and that we must always be vigilant in the pursuit of knowledge, ensuring that it is guided by ethics and compassion. Now, before we come back with brand new episodes for you, do subscribe to our channel Horror Talker. And share it with your friends and family. Until next time, stay awake and stay alert, because you never know.